Welcome to Texas Border Watch, your eyes on the front line for all things immigration, border security, and local policy. I'm Jordan Elder, and I have some bad news for you today. Another case of New World screwworm has been detected near the Texas border. If you need a reminder, the New World screwworm is a flesh-eating bug that spreads in the form of a fly like this one, and it has the potential to devastate livestock populations. So the latest case is in Nuevo Leon, Mexico, about 120 miles from the Texas border. The U.S. Department of Agriculture recently released a map so that we can track how these cases are moving. Now, there are about 800 active cases right now, according to the USDA. Most of them are in this southern part of Mexico, but it's the cases up here in Nuevo Leon that we are more concerned about. There is an active case up here, again, about 120 miles from the border. The best way to get rid of and prevent the screwworm is using sterile fly facilities. Scientists make it so the flies can't make the larva that actually eats the flesh. The USDA says a new facility is opening in northeastern Mexico, which will help with the cases that we've seen in that Nuevo Leon region. A facility in Panama is already open and working on this, and we're going to see more facilities open in Texas too. The newest at Moore Air Base could open in early 2026. The FDA recently released a podcast about the New World screwworm, and I want to show you what they've discovered and how they think our outlook is for keeping it out of the United States.
We probably should preface this by saying that there is no risk that screwworm will cause a pandemic or epidemic in humans. No one is worried about that. There are so many steps that need to take place, as you described, for us.
The transmission pathway?
Yeah, the transmission. You have to have an open wound. You have to have exposure to flies that are, infected with the larva that then can land. It would obviously start with a small wound or infection that would then continue to grow. So if this were on a human, you'd quickly notice a wound or something, but on an animal, it can go unnoticed. So this is really about protecting livestock and in a way that makes sense and in a way that follows protocols so that people can know that the system's working. The USDA will inspect essentially every single animal that goes in processing, meat, poultry, and so that screening procedure would pick up an open wound, especially one of these gnarly wounds with larvae infecting that.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I mean, obviously we're working with the USDA, and they're very aware of the situation, so they're very alerted to looking for these possibilities. So when animals are processed, they will look for those and pull them aside if they are there.
So there's no concern about eating these products?
No. And I think, to go to your point about whether, there's a human issue, in the countries that have had this for years, right, there's only a few hundred cases in those countries altogether. So it's not something that rapidly transmits to humans that would be a big concern for us.
So put that in a scale, it's about less than 1%, less than 0.1%, I believe, actually,
right,
of
exactly.
cases are in humans.
That's crossed over to humans.
Yeah.
And no, there's never been a reported case of somebody getting screwworm infection from eating beef. And so that's an important point.
Yes.
Now, that's not saying that's impossible for all of eternity, but there's in the tens of thousands of cases, never been a single report.
Are Texas gangs and organized crime groups answering to the cartel? One Texas sheriff says yes. Goliad County Sheriff Roy Boyd laid out this theory for an immigration hearing up in Washington, D.C. earlier this week. So I want to show you what he says he's found out.
My name is Roy Boyd. I'm the sheriff of Goliad County, which is rural South Texas County, about halfway between Laredo and Houston, as the senator said. I'm here to discuss the current situation with regards to law enforcement and the enforcement of the laws, and more specifically, the implementation of the 287G task force model, and the need to expand the program and change our model of conducting law enforcement operations across the United States of America. Here's why these efforts are important to the future of our nation and the safety of our citizens. While illegal immigration has been a historical issue along the U.S.-Mexico border, this changed more than a decade ago when the cartels seized control of the border regions of Mexico and changed their business model to include smuggling of people. When this happened, the cartels began controlling who came across the border and began torturing and killing anyone who attempted to violate their control by crossing into the U.S. without paying the cartels. This control gave rise to a new way for the cartels to conduct business throughout the United States and beyond. In Mexico, the federal government leases territories to criminal organizations in what they refer to as the plaza system. The Mexican government allows cartels to conduct limited smuggling and trafficking activities in exchange for a monthly fee, with any activity above and beyond requiring additional payments to government officials as a tax on excess illicit commerce. The cartels have replicated this Mexican government's program with geographic control throughout the United States. I've witnessed this firsthand when I was the chief deputy for Victoria County Sheriff's Office, which is next door to Goliad. The Gulf Cartel took control of the cocaine trade in Victoria and surrounding counties. They then leased the sole distribution rights for the dealing of pure cocaine to the Houston chapter of the Mexican Mafia. The Gulf Cartel then sent out people onto the streets to tell the other dealers that unless they were authorized distributors of pure cocaine, they would have to cut their product by at least 50% with inert material. After operations were underway, the cartel sent people back out on the streets to purchase cocaine from non-authorized distributors for the purpose of testing the product for purity. If the cocaine was without inert product, the dealer was given a warning about violating the cartel's control of the product within the plaza. During this time, we began to receive word from local cocaine dealers that local cocaine dealers were disappearing. Many families were not reporting their missing loved ones to the authorities out of fear of retribution from the cartel and the Mexican Mafia. In total, our contacts on the streets advised that at least 10 drug dealers had refused to dilute their product and had been disappeared, never to be seen again. Only one family went public and sought justice for their son. We never found him or discovered what became of him or his remains. If we are to succeed in this monumental task, this effort of defeating the cartels, we must restructure our law enforcement efforts. We must disregard those who stand in the way of change, ignore the anti-American media outlets working against the interests of Americans, and create a new chain of command and organizational structure that allows for the synergy throughout full spectrum of law enforcement and streamlines the functionality in a manner that demands results and accountability while ensuring funds are being utilized in accordance with their intended purpose. This purpose must be to defund and prosecute organized criminal activity throughout America, which will not happen if we fail to enforce our immigration laws and deport those who have violated our sovereignty and have placed themselves at the disposal of organizations who victimize our citizens.
I talked to the Bexar County Sheriff's Office here in San Antonio, and they tell me that cartel-related activity has been identified in some of their recent drug busts or in human trafficking operations, but they don't see this as a takeover like in Goliad County. Senator John Cornyn presided over that immigration hearing that you saw a little clip of. He says more of those hearings are coming, but one of the Democratic senators at that hearing, California's Alex Padilla, calls them political theater. He says they're not really moving us toward a solution to the overall immigration issue. Finally, on Texas Border Watch, I want to show you some video that we obtained of the Mexican military taking down signs like this one posted on a beach, believed by some to have been planted there by the American side. They're the same signs we've seen troops install in the national defense areas along the border. This is in an area known as Playa Baghdad, largely a beach and fishing town. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum says that her government asked the consulate and the U.S. Embassy about this incident. At first, both said that it wasn't the U.S. President Sheinbaum said a U.S. office later admitted that it hired a company to put up the signs, arguing the river shifts with sediment and the treaty requires the boundary to be clearly defined. Again, the Mexican military took down these signs, but we're keeping an eye on this area for any new developments, especially because President Trump has said he has not ruled out military strikes in places like Mexico, Venezuela, countries that have been pushing drugs toward the United States. That's all for this week's Texas Border Watch. You can read more in depth on any of these stories on our websites, news4sanantonio.com and foxsanantonio.com. We'll see you next week.